We are joined by former Lieutenant Governor and the current president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, or as many of you may know it, SBAM. Joining us now on the show is Brian Calley. Brian, thank you for being with us today.
A pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me on the show.
So how are you? How's your team at SBAM doing?
Well, we've been working remotely since the end of March, 100% remote, so all 26 of us, and we're basically 100% on COVID-19 response and support to our members. So we've got now almost 29,000 members, and it's been quite a journey that they've been on over the course of this time, the closures and then the reopenings and all the new things that have to be done. But I must say that small businesses really have stepped up to the plate when it's come to safe practices, taking care of their employees, and doing the best that they can in such a challenging environment.
It really has been a huge challenge for these small businesses, having to pivot, having to shut down and figure out how to keep afloat, keep alive while not in operation, and then come back when the shutdowns and the restrictions were lifted and try to have a good surge to be able to have a strong summer and a strong fall and hopefully finish out the year with some semblance of recovery from what happened during the shutdowns. But now we're seeing a spike in new cases in the state of Michigan. We reached a record number of single-day cases that hadn't been reached since early March. And today it's reported that Thursday's cases were 446 new cases and 9 new deaths in the state. How great of a concern is it for the small business community that this spike may continue and could potentially lead to more shutdowns?
Well, there is certainly some concern. The governor had used some language that suggested that it was on the table moving back to phase 3, although since then I think they've kind of walked that back, which is appropriate to talk of a statewide movement back, because really there's a lot known about where the infections are coming from. And many are coming from social situations, in other words, not people going to work. But there are still some issues in congregate care facilities, or in some of the migrant population and farms where they live and work together, and there's close exposure. So the more that we know about it, hopefully the more we can target the public policy response so that you're using a scalpel and not a sledgehammer to deal with the problem.
We're joined by Brian Calley, the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. We've seen you even join the governor at our press conferences and urge the people of the state of Michigan and all of our communities to continue to take the precautions necessary so that we're able to protect our small businesses, keep them open, allow them to thrive as they have reopened, and urging them to respect those guidelines. Have the people of Michigan, do you believe, been listening to those calls that you've been heeding, or are they taking it seriously enough?
Yeah, and it's all across the board. Obviously, there's politics infused into all of this as well, which makes it much more complicated. But what we're trying to do is to really focus in and help our members and small businesses to focus in on controlling the things that they can control, and that's what happens in their facility. And so there are some that have been open the whole time because they were in that original essential services category. And there's others that closed down and reopened. And then, of course, there's still others that have never been able to reopen, like gyms and theaters and entertainment venues. So there's a wide range of experience there. But one thing that we're urging our small business owners to do is to get back in that mindset about when they first reopened. And test some of their assumptions. Are they still as vigilant as they were in the beginning? Have things been relaxed? The last thing that you want to do is to have some sort of an outbreak or disease spread tied back to your facility. And so it's not really terribly complicated, but it's extremely important to manage the risk in each facility. And we know that there are some main pillars to that. Health screening among employees is kind of that first line of defense, but then also engineering distancing into your process. So it's not something people have to remember, but it's just a natural outcome of the way that you do business. And then sanitizing and disinfecting commonly touched areas, and then personal protective equipment is kind of that last line of defense. Those are the main pillars, and and it's, if there's high fidelity and attention given to those areas, we know that it does prevent disease spread. And so that's what we're hoping for today, is that we can just recommit ourselves to this to ensure that we stay safe so that we can stay open.
Former Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley and current president of the Small Business Association of Michigan with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Bridge, Michigan recently reported that there's a potential for $100 million in relief aid from the state of Michigan's allotment of federal CARES Act dollars that would be going to small businesses. How critical at this time are those funds to helping this recovery of our small business community?
Very, very critical. In fact, I was pleased that the legislature has really targeted this to the smallest of businesses. So there are, which are the ones, frankly, that are in the most distress right now. And so the way that this works is that any business with fewer than 50 employees that has been negatively impacted by COVID-19, by this pandemic, can apply starting on the 15th of this month. And you'll apply centrally through the MEDC's michiganbusiness.org website, but the decision in terms of how to allocate the money will go to local economic development organizations who have on the ground intelligence of where the biggest needs are. And $100 million, I'm from a little town called Portland in central Michigan. $100 million is a lot of money to me, but it really won't go very far when you consider how many small businesses exist in our state. So the amount that you can get is limited. The maximum is $20,000, and it's meant to help businesses restart and deal with all the challenges that they face as they're trying to rebuild their business. In fact, a lot of small businesses, they're back in startup mode now. I mean, totally had to shut down, and they're literally starting over now. So this will be an important infusion of capital.
That $20,000 maximum for individual grants to these businesses, it's no insignificant amount of money. $20,000 is a lot of money, and that could help for critical systems such as payroll and allowing these companies to pay the current talent and prevent layoffs, or maybe even bring some people on to help them with this resurgence. Just how much are small businesses right now hurting for talent or struggling to get by with a skeleton crew of staff?
Well, we have asked our members how they felt about even surviving. And about 1 in 7 were not confident that they're going to survive. Most businesses expect a significant decline in overall sales or revenue for the calendar year 2020. And so that makes it difficult. Even as you think about restarting, there's a lag between when your expenses start and when the income starts rolling in. So you've got to pay your help as soon as they start. But that doesn't mean that you have any money coming in yet. And so these restart grants will go a long way for that, but they'll also help with the types of investments that businesses have to make in the change in the layout of the business. There might be barriers that have to be installed, the purchase of personal protective equipment, the kind of re-engineering the way that the workflow works. I mean, there's expenses with all of these things, maybe a new ventilation system, who knows? And so these grants were really meant to get right at those issues that are so challenging when it comes to ramping up a business. And it's really heartbreaking, because so many of these businesses, they made it through their startup period. They survived. They made it to a point of maturity, and now they're right back to where they were years ago, and back in that place where it's they're essentially having to rebuild everything.
One of the things you mentioned was about testing. What are you telling the small businesses when it comes to testing? Should their employees be tested? How often are those employees being tested? And is it too much for these small businesses to take on the cost of that testing?
Well, it's not actually COVID-19 tests that I was talking about. It's daily health screening. And there are apps, including a free app that the state provides, that where an employee every day can, before they come into the office, they answer a series of health screening questions. Do I feel feverish? Have I had a cough? Have I been in contact with a person with a fever or certain symptoms in the last 24 hours or since I last came into work? So there's an application where you can screen out a lot of the risk in the first place. and it's a procedure. It's something that has to be done. The idea of health screening itself, as long as it's something that doesn't have to be done on site or doesn't have to be done outside the facility, we think is a doable task. When it comes to the actual test itself, that's done by the healthcare agencies. There's a great network out there. Insurance does cover the cost of a test, and certainly anybody having the main symptoms of COVID-19 ought to be tested, or if you know that you have exposure to a person with COVID-19, then testing would be a good idea too. But testing itself is one thing. That's usually if you have some reason to think you might be sick. But health screening for businesses is a first line of defense. That's just employees answering questions. And then what happens is the app itself, the phone app itself, based on the way you answer the questions, will say, yeah, you should stay home today, or you can go into the office.
Brian Calley with us, the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan on the Oakland County MegaCast, president of the Small Business Association. Brian Calley, previous surveys of small businesses, and you had mentioned this earlier, have been pretty murky as far as the outlook for the future, with very few expecting to survive the pandemic at all. Is that still the case right now, or is there some cause for optimism looking into the future for these small businesses?
Well, it was right around the time that we were moving into phase 4 when we last did a survey, and then as it looked like the state was heading toward phase 5, the more broad reopening that happened in northern lower Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, there was growing optimism. That's kind of anecdotal, but we hadn't surveyed since then, and now there's a lot more uncertainty that has been added in, and nothing will throw a damper on economic activity like uncertainty. So as we continue to monitor what's happening in southern and western states, and we also look at a relatively minor uptick here in Michigan, certainly compared to what we see happening in places like Arizona, Florida, California, Texas, even South Carolina and Georgia. The Michigan's increase looks very mild. However, it's easier to contain when it's small than it is obviously when it's bigger. So that's I think that uncertainty that has been kind of reinserted into this process has really hurt the confidence. But we'll probably go out with another survey. We'll wait a few more weeks on that. We just like to space them out enough to where we're picking up truly the new mood or sentiment. But I would guess that the optimism that we had gained about a month ago is probably ebbing a bit now.
Brian Calley with us, the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. Just a couple more minutes with you before we have to let you go. Anything else that you'd like to touch on before we let you go today?
Well, the main thing that one of the main concerns that we have moving forward is, as the state contemplates ways to figure out how to get better compliance with the use of face coverings and masks among the general public, we really, really would urge all policymakers not to put frontline retail staff and restaurant staff in charge of general public compliance. It's one thing to expect a business owner to make sure that their employees are complying with the rules and using PPE, but really it's such a difficult and controversial issue on what the general public is doing, and the enforcement of that really, we just really do not feel that the business, the frontline retail staff are in a very good position or have the training to de-escalate issues or to deal with the overall compliance. So to the extent that the state wants additional compliance with the general public, it really should be the state that handles the enforcement and not put that on the backs of the small business owners and their staff.
Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Brian Calley, the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast.